Good morning. Good morning, all. Welcome, welcome. You are in for a treat this morning. Absolutely. I am Tim Dickerson, and right now I will describe myself to make this service more accessible for all. I am a tall, bald man, and as Sam Otten has said in the past, I'm very comfortable with that. I have a beard and a floral pink and blue printed shirt on. And I am so happy that each and every one of you are here and present with us this morning. We are a congregation striving to embody courageous love, radical welcome, and deep connection. And we are so glad you are here, bringing all that you are and all that you love and your deepest commitments to a more just world for all. We are glad to be offering a live stream of our service, and we would like to extend an additional welcome to those of you joining us online today. Welcome. We strive to make our worship accessible, and those of you at home or using screen readers in person can find an accessible order of service with hymn lyrics included at our homepage, uucomo.org. If you're on Zoom, we have automated captioning turned on and will provide spoken descriptions of the images and videos shown of the screen. Please let Reverend Molly know if you have any other access needs we can do to help and meet your needs. Email at minister@uucomo.org. For those of you attending with us in person, we invite you to attend carefully to the safety of all by leaving plenty of space, wearing your mask, and ensuring you are greeting one another in a way that is comfortable for both parties. We'd like to particularly welcome any visitors among us this morning and invite you to find our guest book after the service in the entry if you have not already, or in the chat for those of us joining online. We'd love to stay in touch with you about our ongoings and going-ons. Children and babies are always welcome in worship. We also have a lively children's religious educational program and nursery care for our youngest ones. All nursery caregivers and RE teachers are masked and vaccinated. Our children will be invited to their classes after our centering moment and embodied prayer. If you have joys or sorrows you'd like spoken aloud during the service, you can write them on a yellow strip of paper right over here in the corner. So just feel free to fill those out over there. Or if you're online, please include your joys and sorrows in the chat, and they will be relayed to us at that time. Today's service is brought to you by our high school-aged youth for their beloved annual service, where they will provide us all with reflections and music. This year, they will be leading us in a reflection and a call to action regarding the proposed 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism, to grow spiritually by dismantling racism and other oppressions. Like I said, you're in for a treat. Immediately following the service, we will have another discussion group on the UUA 8th principle, with pizza lunch, including gluten-free options, and childcare also is going to be provided. We encourage as many UU churchers as possible to attend. Please come and attend, even if you did not happen to RSVP. You're all welcome. We all want to have this discussion for sure. And now we invite you to bring all of your energy to this time and space as Xander Kent will be singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Xander is a young man with a plaid shirt on, and be prepared. You're in for a treat.
Welcome to the YRUU service. We want to start with a question to the children of our congregation. Each Sunday in RE, you light candles to remember the UU principles. Do you remember how many principles we have as Unitarian Universalists? Today, we want to talk to you about a topic that is really important to us, that we think it is time to add an eighth principle. We need a principle affirming our commitment to work to end racism. The eighth principle was written by Bruce Pollock Johnson at the encouragement of Paula Jones Cole, both UU religious professionals of color. Here is what it says. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working together to develop a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. And here is how we might say it in our RE programs. Build the beloved community free from racism and oppression. The organization Black Lives of UU has advocated for each UU church to adopt the eighth principle and join in the movement for Unitarian Universalism as a whole to make this officially one of our core principles, and then to do the work it tells us to do. We, the YRUU High School Youth Group of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbia, are here today because we believe strongly that we need this principle and that now is the time to proclaim it. But before we start talking about the eighth principle, we think we need to review the first 7. How many of you adults can name all 7 principles? For those of us who grew up UU, the 7 principles, the rainbow principles, as we know them, the 7 colors of the rainbow, are one of our most beloved traditions. Something we talk about, light candles about, and sing about every Sunday. So for our opening hymn, we want to invite you to sing with us an RE song. The tune is familiar, the same as the song Doe a Deer. And the words are printed in your order of service. We will sing it through once and then hum it through once.
Have any of you ever gone to the Science Center in St. Louis and built an arch out of blocks there? You learn a few things building an arch. First of all, it's a bit harder than you might think. Secondly, you need a really good foundation to build on. 3, you cannot build it alone. Even when you think you might have enough people, in the end, you're probably gonna need more. And 4, when it's built, you don't just sit there and look at it. An arch builds a doorway that calls you to move through it.
So now let us light our chalice, and let its light be an invitation to move through from where we are to where we need to be. Please join me in reading our words of affirmation printed in your order of service. Love
is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
We would now like to read to you a story, Our Principles as a House of Love, adapted from Karen Johnston. Did you know that love is a really big deal in Unitarian Universalism? I bet you did. We just can't stop talking about it.
Love this, side with love that. Justice is what love looks like in public. We weren't the first ones to say that. Dr. Cornel West was. But we love it so much that we sing it back to him and the universe all the time.
There was once a scientist who asked all kinds of people, not just Unitarian Universalists, what they thought about love and how important it was to them. His name was Robert Miller. And it turns out that of all the groups he studied, whether religious or not, UUs rank love as a core value more so than others do.
I guess love really is a big deal for us UUs.
I want you to remember that, because we're going to come back to it.
Another big deal in Unitarian Universalism is our principles. They're a big part of our covenant with each other.
We know they are a big part and a big deal because we have so many ways to talk about them, to make sure all the different brains and bodies and ages can understand them. There's this way, which is really a list in English. Which is also listed in your hymnal on the page before the first hymn.
And this way, which is the list in Spanish.
You can also see our principles in languages like Arabic and in Thai.
And there's this way, which is in language for kids.
And there's this cool principle wheel by Reverends Ian Riddle and Kimberly DeBoose, which shows not a linear way to think about the relationships between the different principles. And here is the way we often talk about it in RE, as a rainbow.
So many ways. All of these ways are focused on the 7 principles. When Unitarian Universalism first came into being in 1961, there were only 6 principles. Our 7th principle was proposed in 1985 and added in 1987. One way to imagine our principles was originally suggested by Reverend Barbara Wells Tenhove. It's called a keystone arch. This is like a doorway through which we enter into what this faith calls us towards.
And it's kind of cool, because the 4th principle, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, is at the center, holding together the space for us to balance between the needs of the individual and the needs of our great community, of which we are all a part. You can see that each principle on this side about individuals is mirrored on the other side with the principle about community. But do doorways and arches ever just exist all by themselves, just floating in air?
Not really, right? They're usually stabilized on the ground, a part of a larger building or structure.
So maybe there's a principle that's still missing.
Just like we figured out 35 years ago when we decided that the 7th principle was missing, maybe the missing principle is the ground upon which the doorway is built.
Maybe it's the whole house of love we're always trying to create for ourselves, each other, and the world.
Maybe if we add an 8th principle, we will get closer to the beloved community we dream about, where there is no oppression of any kind, where we can say Black Lives Matter, but we don't have to, because they already do.
I want to be a part of building this house of love. Do you?
For our centering, we will do a breathing meditation, helping us imagine creating this entrance into the house of love. This meditation will involve stretching our arms out to the side like this. So if you want more space to do this, you are invited to move to the front or back of the sanctuary as you wish. If you want to remain seated and don't have the space, you can make a smaller arch with your hands. Or just sit still and let your imagination create the arch. Breathe in deeply and feel the sensation of welcome of all the people you want to welcome into this space. And as you breathe out, imagine the love you want to share with them. Keep holding these feelings on each in-breath and out-breath. Now, stretch your arms out wide to each side of you. Palms up. Breathe in deeply and arc your arms up until they are straight above your head, palms touching. Breathe out slowly, and as you do, turn your palms outward and imagine painting your fingertips and the air with a translucent, shimmering red. Breathe in again and raise your arms. Breathe out and paint the air with the orange of a magnificent sunset. Breathe in again and raise your arms. Breathe out and paint the air with the yellow glow of sunlight. Breathe in again and raise your arms. Breathe out and paint the air around you with the glowing green of a leafy canopy on a summer's day. Breathe in again and raise your arms. Breathe out and paint the air with the crystalline blue of a tropical ocean. Breathe in again and raise your arms. Breathe out and paint the air with the serene indigo of twilight. Breathe in again and raise your arms. Breathe out and paint the air with a glistening amethyst violet. And now, turn your attention to the ground you stand on. Feel the power there. Imagine this shining doorway as you sit here at the threshold. Know that you are ready to continue this journey to create a beloved community.
Okay, and now we invite you more fully into this community together with an embodied meditation. You can come forward and select the stone. Imagine it holding whatever joys and sorrows you carry with you today. And then drop it into the bowl of water and imagine it as our community and its help in holding what you carry. If you have a joy or sorrow that you would like read aloud, write it on a slip of paper at our candle table. If you are listening online, you can share them online with our live stream team. And if you would like, you can take a moment to move through the arch we have built together, singing the children out Jamila and nu- oh, sorry.
Do you want somebody to stand next to it or something for it?
And now, children will depart for their classrooms. You can find your teachers in the back of the room and head on down, and we can sing the children out with the words printed in your order of service.
Live in joy, go in peace. Hold all our love as we part. Live in joy, go in peace. Hold all our love in your heart.
Let us take a moment now to center ourselves as we prepare to hold together the joys and sorrows and prayers of our community. We join our hearts with Jeff Orway, remembering his aunt, Dixie Meredith, who passed away this last week. We join our hearts with Charlie Wilson. He had a lot of family issues and struggles to feel loved. We are grateful for the beautiful service celebrating Andrew Twaddle's life yesterday. Joy that my mom, brother, sister-in-law will be moving from Alaska to Florida and be closer to us. I don't know who submitted that, but what a joy. And from Dottie and Rosie and myself as well, our hearts are with Reverend Molly's family as they join together to find medical solutions for her dear brother Robbie's newly discovered health crisis. These and the many joys and sorrows and prayers not spoken aloud, but held tenderly in heart, we lift up in the love that sustains, connects, and transcends us. And I want to share a very short prayer on the theme of our service today, written by Shannon Lang. Spirit of life, may we dig deeply, examine closely, speak truthfully, and work diligently, tirelessly, honestly, lovingly, empathetically, and continuously, so that all among us feel welcomed and loved. The youth are all very good at this. I'm a little out of practice. Please rise or remain seated as you are most comfortable and join me in singing hymn 318, We Would Be One.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. To show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Alrighty. Today's reading is from Shannon Lang, who the prayer was also written by. She is a Unitarian Universalist of color. I love my congregation, but as a black woman, before I enter the doors of my church or a committee meeting, I often feel like I have to put on my armor. Chances are, someone's going to say something hurtful. They're not going to mean it, but it's going to happen. And I've got to gird myself up for the unintended pain that will come. I know my siblings in faith love me, and I love them too, but it has happened time and time again. I'm not alone in this. It's a pretty common experience for Black and other UUs of color. I identify with the findings of a 2018 survey that Blue, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, conducted of Black UUs. Most Black UUs feel a deep sense of isolation and rely heavily on social media to connect with other Black UUs. Black people tend to become a part of UU congregations because of the theology, not because of the community. White dominant culture gets in the way of their communal experience and serves as an exclusionary force in church life. Simply put, Black people, when they show up in ways that are culturally divergent from white, middle, and upper class culture, do not feel welcomed. The impact of these experiences, regardless of intention, is clear. The lack of Black and brown faces in our spaces speaks volumes. In contrast, when I attend Blue worship services, which are Black-only sacred spaces, I feel like I am home. I am comforted. I am nourished. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to address microaggressions. I don't have to say, I am sorry, but you really can't say that, and here's why. Instead of having to enter the space girded with armor for protection, I can enter the space with an open mind, heart, and soul. My hope is that every member of each UU congregation pledges to do their individual anti-racism and anti-oppression work, that every member searches honestly within themselves and analyzes their individual part in creating an atmosphere that has been historically unwelcoming to Black and brown siblings of color. In order to be a truly welcoming community, the systems of power and privilege that exist in our spaces need to be actively dismantled. Together, we can become radically welcoming, but only if we're willing, as individuals and as a movement, to do the hard work that comes along with it.
The 7 principles. One of the first things we learn in RE. I will admit that sometimes I get the numbers wrong. A 3 becomes a 4, or more egregiously, a 2 becomes a 6. But the key ideas of the 7 principles, that I cannot forget. When asked to describe Unitarian Universalism, I would say that it is a non-creedal spiritual community dedicated to supporting our communities within and without, all while searching for truth and meaning in a messy and confusing world. It's what makes Unitarian Universalism so unique, that despite both originally being branches of Christianity, none of us are expected to worship the Christian God, to worship Jesus as our Lord and Savior, or to follow the 10 Commandments. We have no creed, no set beliefs, but I would argue that the closest thing we have to one, something almost indistinguishable from a creed, is our 7 principles. They are our key values, our beliefs. They're what make UUs UUs. And while younger than most, they're still not perfect. Those who wrote the original 6 principles wrote the best principles they could for their world. But we do not live in their world anymore. As time passed, so much has changed that not only would they not recognize our world, they could not even imagine it. Those who wrote our original 6 principles could not dream of the advances in technology and medicine we now have today. They also probably couldn't dream of a worldwide global pandemic. Because we do not live in their world anymore, their principles are no longer sufficient. Like many old documents, they must be changed, not erased, but built on to make something that now serves our needs as a community. So to transform our 7 principles into a new idea that supports our beloved community, we need an 8th. We all know the 7 principles, hopefully. But what is this mysterious 8th? As Camille previously read, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Paula Cole Jones and Bruce Pollock Johnson first wrote the language of the 8th principle in 2013. After noticing that many UUs following the 7 principles did not truly think about or deal with racism and other oppressions at a systemic level, Jones believed that it was necessary to introduce an 8th principle to make it clear that being a UU requires actions against systemic oppression. Since its proposal, some UU congregations have already adopted it. We, the youth of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbia, want our congregation to be one. Ultimately, there will be a vote on this addition soon. And after hearing our sermon and speech and its entire service, we hope that you will understand why it is so necessary for us to affirm this. Perhaps this seems obvious. After all, UUs have been involved in anti-racist movements for centuries. How many times have we heard in RE about abolitionist UUs like Peter Clark, David Eaton, and Francis Harper? Or about our involvement in the civil rights movement? How 2 white UUs acted on what Martin Luther King Jr. said and went down to protest in Alabama, where ultimately they died. Viola Luiso and James Reeb were killed for protesting. Their 2 white deaths became martyrs and brought media attention to a movement in the way that only privilege can. But if you take a look around, the color you see the most in this room is not one of our rainbow of principles, but instead the color of my skin. It is important to recognize that there are Black UUs and other UUs of color, and their existence and contributions to Unitarian Universalism must not be forgotten or ignored. But the question appears, why is it that despite our historic commitment to anti-racist movements, our congregations remain so overwhelmingly white? The unfortunate answer is that despite our outward commitment to anti-racism, our congregations remain unwelcoming to Black, brown, and other UUs of color. How many times have you heard a UU bemoan, "Why are there so few Black UUs?" But this is the wrong question. There are 2 far more important ones. First, what are we doing to support the Black and brown UUs we already have? And second, what about our beloved community is so unwelcoming to Black and brown individuals that even though they are drawn to our theology and our principles, they ultimately do not join our communities? We, as a church, often pat ourselves on the back for our contributions to anti-racist movements, while ignoring how racism still thrives within our communities. Egbert Alfred Brown was a Black man who grew up in the Episcopal Church, but he was drawn to Unitarianism. When he attempted to found a Unitarian church in which he would be the minister, the Unitarian Association denied his membership, denied him funding. And so while his church was Unitarian in all but name, it was not associated with Unitarianism. Black UUs have spoken out time and time again about the racism they feel within our communities. Microaggressions that make them feel unwelcome. A lack of Black UUs in positions of power, and an ignorance of their voices. But why is this the way our congregations are? We have committed ourselves to fighting against racism, but we do not look inward on how racism itself is perpetuated in our communities. The branch of Unitarian Universalism we practice is tied into the history of America. We have had multiple UU presidents. And so it is unsurprising that the same problems that plague the United States plague our congregations. While fighting outwardly for equality, we have not looked inward to analyze how our systems contribute, how they are built just like systems of the United States on racism. This leads to our communities feeling unwelcoming for Black and brown individuals who might otherwise be drawn to the ideas of Unitarian Universalism. Ultimately, our commitment to anti-racism must extend not only outward, but inward. This is not a criticism of you as an individual. It's not even a criticism of us as a congregation, but rather to say that we have failed to do what we have set out to do. We have grown too comfortable in acting outwardly while ignoring the ways in which our communities are unwelcoming, the ways in which our communities are structured on oppression. And in order to build this beloved community that we so desire, we have to keep fighting outward, but we have to start looking inward. Ultimately, we, the YRUU, are the future of the Unitarian Universalist Church. And we happen to be more diverse than the population of adults in this church. But why? Because for many UUs, they grow up Unitarian, Universalist. But as they enter their 20s, they start to see that they are unwelcome because of their race. And then they leave. We need to ensure that our communities are welcoming, so that these individuals do not feel like, despite their belief in our principles, that they need to leave. One question that was first proposed in response to this 8th principle is, why do we single out racism? There are so many forms of interconnected oppressions. Why does this principle specifically say racism? There's two things that we need to understand. First, yes, this principle does say dismantling racism, but it also says that we must dismantle other systems of oppression. Supporting the 8th principle does not mean that we should ignore other forms of oppression, but that something about the way in which we as UUs have addressed racism is different than how we've addressed other forms of oppression. Queer and trans UUs do not come out and say that they do not feel welcome in our spaces. Women do not say that they do not feel welcome in our spaces. But it is Black, brown, and other individuals of color who say that they do not feel welcome in our spaces. So clearly something is different. Something about how we have worked within ourselves to combat racism has failed in a way that it is not for other forms of oppression. And so we must specifically dedicate ourselves to racism, to dismantling it within ourselves, naming it so that we cannot ignore it like we have in the past. Ultimately, we've grown up with 7 principles that form a rainbow. Introducing an 8th might complicate that rainbow. But there's so much beauty in 8. Just as there is in 7. 7 creates a rainbow. But 8 is an octave. 2 notes so harmonious in music that we call them the same thing. 8 completes our arch, provides us with a foundation which all of our principles build upon. Resisting structural oppression,
What else would we say that our principles talk about? That all of us are equal, that we all deserve a voice. All of that supports and is supported by this 8th principle. So while our rainbow might not work as well anymore, there certainly is beauty in 8. Beauty in the octave, and beauty in an arch that is finally complete. One with a foundation, with stability. One that determines that we must commit ourselves back to looking within ourselves, to combating racism within our communities, to ensure that our communities are more welcoming to individuals who are Black, brown, or otherwise individuals of color, to make our communities no longer feel like a space that you have to put on armor to enter, that they are as open as they are to us, that any individual can walk in with an open heart and not be afraid of what someone might say to them. I grew up with 7 principles, and for that, I will be forever grateful to this beloved community. But I and the rest of the YRUU want the next generation to grow up with 8. Thank you.
We will be taking a Faith to Action collection today for Worley Street Roundtable. All donations not otherwise designated will go to Worley Street Roundtable. David, good, you're here, I didn't see you, is here to tell you a little about the work they do.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Bonjour. I've been attending this Unitarian Universalist church for a while now, and it's been thanks to the support of Molly and some of the members that I can attribute some of my early career success, and I just want to express my gratefulness for the people in this church, the leadership in this church. And with that in mind, I want to talk about Worley Street Roundtable, this notion of support that goes to individuals out of just compassion and belief for a better future. And I think that's what I've received here at this church for my own individual and professional growth. So I'm excited to be here and discussing this, just what Worley Street Roundtable is all about. So on behalf of Worley Street Roundtable, we thank you for considering our organization during this offering. Worley Street Roundtable in September of 2014 began with a call from Ms. Verna LeBoy, some of you may know her, asking her friends to join her and her family for a Sunday dinner. The objective of the Sunday dinner was to discuss ways to address the school-to-prison pipeline her own grandchildren were being subjected to. It was early September. Close to 70 people showed up in her house. from teachers, religious leaders, community organizers, myself as a graduate student I was attending, professors, business leaders, and other community leaders showed up eager to discuss this issue. So what was the situation? In the wake of Michael Brown's killing in early August of 2014, Ms. Verna and her own older children began realizing that that was close to happening in Columbia, Missouri. Her grandchildren, first graders, were being harshly mistreated by educators. And the issue for her was, for Ms. Verna, was that it wasn't just one family, it was multiple of her own family members having this experience. The children who attended CPS schools were being treated as problem children, rather than seeing them as children with hope and promise and potential. If that was not enough, the issue, the largest issue was as well the little communication that the adults received about their children. Again, not that that wasn't enough, this situation was occurring across the Columbia community, who were experiencing the mistreatment of educators and a lack of cooperation. And the elephant in the room here during that conversation and in our work is that many of those children were Black. I praise Alex and the youth for such a moving and brave call for the 8th principle. Worley Street Roundtable also wants to contribute to that 8th principle. The solution for Ms. Verna to address the systemic racism that her own children were experiencing and other children in this community was to come together and have a Sunday dinner with community leaders and other families to begin addressing the issue, but most importantly, to understand how can we collaborate as a community. And our angle was, how can we support CPS? The heart is there, the tools are there, but they need a little push. So how could we support them? That became our vision. And our driving mission has been to ensure that students, parents, and other organizations within the public school system create viable ways to help children succeed academically, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. We are currently on our 7th year as an official non-for-profit organization serving students and families so that those spaces are created for their highest potential. So if your heart allows it, your donation will support one of the following programs that we have maintained. The first program, and we don't call it a program, but it's part of Worley Street's heart, is those Sunday dinners that we have every 3rd Sunday of every month to foster those collaborations, to create a space for community dialogue on what's going on in your families, what's going on in the schools, and how can we bring different walks of life in the space and think through solutions together. 2 years ago, Brittany Fatoma helped us start the Teachers of Color Support Network to support educators of color here in CPS and Mid-Missouri by creating organic community support to recruit and retain Black and brown educators. The idea was that we noticed that CPS had a difficult time retaining highly qualified and diverse educational staff. So we hope that this network will help retain some of those teachers to help all students, especially our Black and brown students. Additionally, we have begun a partnership with Grade 8+, a tutoring program and a program that supports families with low resources, who are providing students and families self-advocacy and leadership sessions on a monthly basis to help them navigate the difficulty situations that they're experiencing in the schools and other public institutions. So I want to thank the youth for their time and energy in this program for today. I want to thank you for listening, and thank you for considering our organization as one of the many ways that we can support to change the systemic racism that is occurring in our city. Thank you.
Our closing words are doing the work that needs to be done, also by Shannon Lang. There's a pattern here. There are UU congregations that haven't adopted the eighth principle or have voted against it because they feel our other principles cover it. But they don't. The other principles absolutely do not cover it. The eighth principle is about action. It is about actively dismantling racism. It specifically speaks to dismantling racism within the institution, our institutions. UU congregations are notorious for saying, we want more people of color to come through our doors, that we don't understand why they are not there, why they used to be there and they aren't anymore. If your congregation isn't adopting the eighth principle or you're considering voting against it, that is your answer. To me, a vote against the eighth principle is a vote against me, against our other principles, against love. The eighth principle is about doing the work that needs to be done, the work that you think you're doing as individuals and as a congregation, but you're really not doing. By adopting this principle, it would actively show that you really do love and care about the community. We hope you stay for a discussion of the eighth principle after the service. We will have pizza and childcare, like Tim said. And we hope that when this vote comes before our congregation, you will commit yourself to doing the work that needs to be done and vote for the eighth principle. We will now sing our benediction with the words printed in your order of service.